Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Dr. Romani Network. So, I'm going to start today's episode by asking you a few questions. Drop a comment if you can relate. So, the first question is: how many of you were praised for being the strong one while you were quietly falling apart inside? How many of you feel exhausted all the time, but still push yourselves to keep everyone and everything else afloat? How many of you were raised to have duties, but not opinions? How many of you were taught to be good, helpful, selfless, and suppress your emotions long before you were ever taught to care for yourself? So if you said yes to any of the above, and I am willing to make a big bet on the fact that many of you said yes to most of those, today's show is very much for you. Today, I'm going to be joined by Sarah Hirsch Bordeaux, an award-winning filmmaker and the author of a powerful new book called Autoimmunity and the Good Girls: How Permission to Put Ourselves First Has the Power to Keep Us Well. Somebody told me about Sarah's book. I have been dying to meet her. Now I actually get to meet her. It's the best part of the job. And so let's bring Sarah on. I have so many things to tell you, to ask you, to talk to you about. So hello, Sarah. So many things to say. It's first of all, it's such a pleasure to meet you.
I'm so honored. I'm
Oh,
just
sweet.
so honored. Thank you also for just creating the space
Mm,
for all of us looking for a sanctuary for these
mm.
kinds of conversations. Thank you so much.
I so appreciate that. And I have to say that I don't even know. I wish I could remember the context in which the conversation about you came up, but whatever it was, and somebody told me about your book, I'm like, we have to get our, not only say immediately I have to get my hands on this book. I contacted our producers and said, we have to get this woman on the show. So we're so grateful you said yes. And where I really want to begin and why this is so personal and why it's so relevant to this community, Sarah, is some months back, I have a healing program, which is a more intensive healing program for people who are recovering from or even currently in narcissistic relationships. And these might have been marriages, these might have been families of origin, it could be workplace, could be all of the above. And one month we were doing the effect of emotionally abusive relationships on the body. All right. So we did a straw poll. There's about 250 people on the program at the time. We have a big program, thousands of people in it. But in that particular moment when we did the poll, there were about 250 people live on the program. They're an incredibly engaged group. They really support each other. But people in that healing program, they have been through it. Okay.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
question I asked is, how many of you have been diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder or have significant enough autoimmune symptoms, and I put up a graphic listing all of them, that it causes you significant difficulty? Okay.
Mhm.
We put up the poll. 77% of people said yes. Now, you know better than I do that the rates of autoimmune in the general population, if you put everyone together, only somewhere between 3 and 7%. 77%. I mean, I think I was transfixed by this number. I was even, contacting our healing program staff. I'm like, did you put that poll up right? They're like, yeah. So you're
Mhm.
talking about the majority, three-quarters of this group of people, hundreds of people answering that particular poll, all endorsed this. And I said, this autoimmune connection is extremely real. No doctors ask about it. These are people who have been gaslighted to within an inch of their lives in their close relationships. Then they go to a doctor's office and they get gaslighted again. So for years and years and years, people suffer silently with this. But then I came to find out that you went out there and you actually collected data. So I wanted to just preface it to understand the big story of, like, I can't believe someone has some of the answers. And that is you, my dear. So welcome. I just wanted to share that. I would love to hear some of your thoughts on that too.
Well, blessings. And it was our mutual champion in Dr. Mate that introduced
Dr.
me.
Who I adore, of course, is my bestie. So yeah.
So I was so grateful that this resonated with him, and I quoted his work so often, and you were in
Yes, I know. I saw that.
and you were in conversation about that. You know, I think that one of the pieces for me that I'll just sort of build the block with is that so many of us were raised to feel um, good when we were loved and loved when we were good.
Mm,
There was a very clear catalyst for me, Dr. Ramani, about 3.5 years old, when I went from having both parents and a very happy, um, very organic childhood. I had space and freedom to be little. And when my siblings were born, I have twin brothers, and I was 3.5 years old. When they were born, I remember overnight going from having two hands to hold to no hands.
mm,
And I talk often about how I think so many of us had interrupted girlhoods.
mm,
And
mm,
for me, in that space, I felt like I went from understanding the dynamics about my role in our family was I was just a little girl into that evolving into a sense and an understanding and a learned conditioning of
mhm,
not here to be little anymore. I'm here to be helpful now.
mhm,
And I'm here to be in service now. And I think for me and for so many of us, that created a character instead of an identity.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
Does that
mhm.
resonate with
It
you?
does, and I would take that even one step further with a lot of the with the issues I talk about. It's not even just about creating a character. It's about creating a character and safety
That's
because
right.
that's really like the identity has to go, right?
Yes.
Because that's going to
And
get
safety and belonging
and yes, safety, belonging, safety, attachment, and really frank safety,
together.
right? And so that, what the very thing we got praised for, we were being, but in essence, everyone was being praised for abandoning themselves as especially as little girls.
That's right.
That's what it was. And so the true self remains a source of fear throughout the lifespan, but that doesn't come without a cost. This is where we come into your work, which is the we get sick. It's
Yes,
not
we
as
do.
simple as like, great, I'll just take on a character, I'll just abandon myself. Easy
No,
peasy.
no.
Not so easy
Right.
peasy. You get
That's
sick.
exactly right. And I also interviewed just to sort of wrap the difference in that I not only did research amongst 1,000 American women
Hmm.
with autoimmune conditions like I was
Hmm.
diagnosed with Hashimoto's, but I also interviewed qualitatively many youngest daughters.
Mm.
And what I have to say is that this almost emotional and psychographic DNA of a youngest daughter has a
Hmm.
very different set of truths. And all of them who I interviewed are very healthy and have never received a chronic diagnosis.
That's fascinating. I happen to be an eldest daughter, which which I found that theme in your book really, really fascinating. And that, I mean, I guess especially the eldest daughter must really be the one who's pulled into a parental role. I guess I'd imagine, Sarah, potentially there's some exception that the only exceptions to that I could see is perhaps if that eldest daughter herself develops her own antagonistic personality and maybe become a rebel or acts
Yes,
out or
yes,
draws attention, golden childs it up. And then the youngest daughter I could see being co-opted and pulled into that parentified role because the eldest daughter isn't performing. Does that make sense?
100%. And, for me, I think that a lot of us find, some of this mission-based work, and I've been a documentary filmmaker for a
Mm,
very long time of women and girls stories. I'm very curious by nature, and I love peeling back the layers of what makes us us. And
hmm.
for me, as a storyteller, what I began to see was that the body and the immune system isn't just speaking science, it's speaking story.
Hmm.
And when I was diagnosed, I started asking questions around the women and the women around me. And
Mm.
we were all either the eldest or the only daughter who were being diagnosed with something chronic or autoimmune. And I found that, Dr. Ramani, fascinating. And I sort of, that I had this insight about 15, 18 years ago. And so I just sort of put it in my back pocket. I didn't have
Interesting.
the foggiest
Yeah.
idea about what I
Yeah.
was going to do with it, but I just knew that like maybe I can, maybe there's something here. So
Yeah.
my team and I started doing research. We started
Hmm.
calling NIH and CDC and saying, do you have any birth order data
Mm.
as it relates to autoimmune diagnoses in American
Hmm.
women? And we called the census. I mean, there just wasn't anything out there. There was birth order, um, let's say, findings across different health conditions, but not as it
Hmm.
related specifically to women like me with autoimmune. So I had that in my back pocket, and then I hit a series of diagnoses that became the catalyst for me taking the jewel out of the back pocket. And that was breast tumors, ovarian and uterine tumors. I had active relapse of Hashimoto's. I had active Epstein-Barr. I had early stage melanoma. And none of the doctors were able to sort of give me a map to what had
Wow.
happened to me to
Hmm.
arrive in this. And I think that so many conversations in the mind body space are, approaching women like me
Yeah.
with catalysts like this, saying, it took me getting to the floor and not being able to get up on my own that
Yeah.
made me begin to ask some different questions.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think when I funded this research, it was right after I had done a survey about 300 women, and
Hmm.
70% of them were the eldest or the only daughter.
Hmm.
And then from that 300, I was like, well, in order for anybody to give a whoop from a documentary filmmaker about, this insight, I was going to have to test it at scale. And that's when I used all of my own savings and fronted this research.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
that research, blessingly has been supported by people of note. And that's when it came to the point of 64% of women were either the eldest or the only daughter. But to loop back to what you said, my research said 1 in 4 women had at least one
Right.
autoimmune.
See,
So
you
I was
see,
hitting a
yeah.
much higher percentage than that 7 to 8%.
Correct. Right. And
Um,
we're getting that 3 times as much because this was a population where every single person, without exception, in a significant relationship was being invalidated and emotionally abused and had to self-abandon to survive. So 100% of the sample of folks we surveyed had self-abandoned. 77% were showing up with significant autoimmune. So, you know what I'm saying? So I think
oh,
when
yes,
that finding that your R2 findings really do kind of
I think
are
so.
quite
But
complementary.
you had
Yeah.
proposed something, and I just wanted to go back. And I'm sorry, I'm so nervous. So I'm going to settle
Oh,
in.
you're doing great.
No, I have a beta blocker just here in case. um,
You're great. Don't worry.
but what I peeled back the onion was to your point about sometimes the eldest daughter has a different experience than
Yeah.
sort of the, one in charge. To me, the sweet spot was women who were raised as caretakers as girls.
Mm, mm,
That
mm, mhm.
caretaker conditioning
Yeah. Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
almost more
Yeah.
dangerous, and it is insidious. It doesn't matter of a birth order. There were
Ah, interesting.
there yes, yes, yes. I had done a large handful of one-on-one interviews with diagnosed women, and I interviewed a few middle children, middle daughters, and they were the ones with the caretaker gene, and they were the ones who were diagnosed, and their eldest sisters were not.
So it really is coming down. It sounds like birth order matters somewhat because it's often
Yeah.
the eldest daughter gets pulled in that role, but ultimately it's really coming down to who is the one who's, for lack of a better term, groomed into that caregiver role, right? And it's often,
Self-neglecting,
right?
self-betraying,
Mm-hmm.
self-abandoning,
Mm-hmm.
all
Yeah.
of that, all of those conditionings that require us, unconsciously to feel safe, to feel like we belong, to say that we
Yeah.
matter, to feel that
Mm-hmm.
we're loved. And this is a pattern that is simply graduating into womanhood, that
Mm-hmm.
is a very frightening set of truths in womanhood, because women who are diagnosed are unable to receive comfortably care,
Right.
support.
Right.
They're unable and so painfully uncomfortable. And I was all of
Mm-hmm.
these things, all of these things. We can't self-advocate. We don't know how. We don't want to disappoint anybody. And we don't want to be too much trouble. So we just stay suppressed.
Right, because, but again, I'm always going to argue that to get care or support, especially for people who are, again, in these antagonistic, invalidating, emotionally abusive relationships,
Mhm.
either it means now you've pinged a transaction. This asking for care will be used against you for the next 10 years.
That's
Okay?
right.
It will come up over and over. It'll come up so many times that you're like, "Oh my gosh, I would have been better off like lying in my own filth than asking for someone to help me." That is the experience of so many people, number one. And then number two, it's the not self-advocating is finding voice, right? And finding voice is what makes you a target in these systems. If you speak out, if you self-advocate, if you voice a need, there is a silencing, and that gets conditioned into the body, right? So you're like, I don't, I don't like that, so I'm not going to do that. And so this all though connects to a construct you raised in the book, Sarah, called the whole concept of the good girl, right? And I'd love for you to talk about that, because I thought that it nailed it. Like, as soon as you said it, I knew what you meant, but I think it would be helpful for all of us to hear. So can you talk a little bit about this sort of good girl concept? Because I think that cuts to the core of what you're talking about here.
Yes. I think what I found that sort of in my own set of truths was, um, my body was, and with my immune system, and in that when you have an autoimmune, your body is in essence, it can't recognize itself. So it's attacking itself. It can't recognize the good or the bad cells. So it begins
Hmm.
to attack.
Hmm.
Um, to me, that said that a self in compromise was creating immunity in compromise.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that if I wasn't able to recognize myself, why should my immune system?
Hmm. 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 That's fast. That's so beautifully put, Sarah. Wow. Join the Dr. Ramani Network today.